Stop scrolling. The quiet you're holding right now is doing more than any message you could send. Somewhere she feels it, and it's unsettling her. That silence is not empty. It's loud inside her mind. Before we go deeper, if this kind of truth hits close to home, subscribe to this channel and like this video, because what you're about to hear isn't talked about honestly anywhere else. I'm speaking to you as a psychologist and as a woman who understands what happens beneath the surface when a man chooses restraint over reaction. You were taught that silence means weakness, that if you don't explain yourself, defend yourself, or chase clarity, you lose. That belief keeps men stuck, overgiving, and emotionally exposed. Silence, when it's grounded and intentional, activates something far more powerful than words ever could. It removes certainty, and the human mind, especially when emotionally invested, cannot tolerate uncertainty for long. When you remain silent, you interrupt the emotional feedback loop she's used to. She knows how to handle attention. She knows how to manage reassurance. She even knows how to navigate conflict. But silence forces reflection. Her mind begins replaying moments, tones, facial expressions, searching for meaning. She wonders what you're thinking. She wonders what you're feeling. And most importantly, she wonders whether she still has access to you. That question is the one that lands deepest. This is not about manipulation or punishment. It's about psychological space. When you stop filling every gap with explanations, you allow your presence to gain weight. Men who talk too much dilute their value without realizing it. Silence, paired with emotional self-control, signals confidence, boundaries, and self-respect. These traits are processed instinctively, not logically. She doesn't think, he's being confident. She feels a subtle shift in power, and that feeling stays with her. The longer the silence lasts, the more her emotional investment surfaces. Not because you disappeared, but because you didn't collapse. You didn't beg to be understood. You didn't chase validation. You trusted your own emotional center enough to stay still. And stillness is unsettling to someone who expects you to move. Right now, if you're silent, you're not losing ground. You're revealing it. You're showing that your emotional world doesn't revolve around reaction. That realization echoes in her long after the noise fades. That is when silence transforms from absence into presence, and presence reshapes desire permanently. Silence works because it forces her to confront something she didn't expect to face so soon, herself. When you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop trying to manage her emotions, she's left alone with her own. And that is where depth is created. Most emotional connections don't deepen through talking. They deepen through unanswered questions, through moments that linger, through space that invites meaning. As a psychologist, I've seen this pattern repeat endlessly. When a man withdraws his voice but not his integrity, the woman's nervous system reacts, not with panic at first, but with alertness. She becomes more attentive to memories. She replays conversations. She examines her own words more closely than she ever examined yours. Silence turns you into a mirror, and what she sees reflected back isn't you. It's her level of attachment. Here's the truth most men never hear. The emotional weight of a relationship is not carried by the one who speaks the most. It's carried by the one who can remain centered without external validation. When you remain silent, you communicate that your sense of worth doesn't depend on immediate reassurance. That alone elevates you psychologically. It shifts you from being an emotional participant to an emotional reference point. This is why silence feels heavier the longer it lasts. At first, she assumes you'll return to your old pattern. She expects a message, a check-in, an explanation. When that doesn't happen, the silence begins to stretch. It creates a vacuum, and the mind rushes to fill vacuums. She starts attributing meaning to your absence. She wonders if she misjudged her importance to you. She questions whether she revealed more than you did. That imbalance wakes something primal. You're not silent because you don't care. You're silent because you care enough not to abandon yourself. There is a difference, and she senses it even if she can't articulate it. Your silence isn't chaotic, it's composed. That composure tells her you're not emotionally reactive, and emotionally reactive men feel predictable. Predictability kills emotional intensity. What happens next is subtle but powerful. She becomes more emotionally available in her own mind before she ever reaches out. She rehearses conversations she hasn't had yet. She imagines outcomes. She feels before she acts. By the time she speaks again, if she does, the silence has already done its work. This is the deeper truth. Silence doesn't chase connection, it reveals it, and once revealed, it can't be unseen. There comes a point where the silence stops being about her and starts reshaping you. This is where its real power lives. When you resist the urge to reach out, to explain yourself, to restore comfort, you're not just creating space in her mind, you're building stability in your own. And that internal stability changes how you move through every interaction, not just this one. Psychologically, silence forces emotional discipline. It requires you to sit with discomfort without outsourcing relief. Most people break silence not because they have something meaningful to say, but because they want the tension to stop. When you don't break it, you're training your nervous system to remain calm under uncertainty. That calm becomes your baseline, and people respond to it instinctively. From her perspective, something important is happening. She's no longer reacting only to your absence. She's reacting to your restraint. Restraint signals choice. It tells her that if and when you speak, it's because you want to, not because you need to. That distinction is subtle, but it's one of the strongest drivers of respect. Need feels heavy. Choice feels powerful. As the days stretch, the silence starts to feel intentional to her, even if it began unintentionally. She senses that you're not frozen or confused, you're grounded. That perception alone reframes the entire dynamic. You're no longer someone waiting for an emotional outcome. You're someone who can live without one. And paradoxically, that makes connection feel more valuable, not less. This is where many men sabotage themselves. They reappear too quickly, too emotionally, undoing everything the silence created. When you break silence from a centered place, your tone changes. Your words are fewer. Your energy is steadier. You don't seek reassurance. You offer presence. That difference is felt immediately. Silence also filters intention. It reveals whether the connection was built on mutual interest or constant stimulation. If nothing returns after silence, you haven't lost something real. You've learned something essential. And if something does return, it returns with a different weight. Less casual, less careless, more deliberate. There's strength in allowing outcomes without forcing them. Silence communicates that you're not afraid of either result. That fearlessness is rare, and rarity increases value. You become less predictable, not because you're playing games, but because you're no longer emotionally exposed. In the end, silence doesn't guarantee a specific reaction from her. What it guarantees is this: you don't abandon yourself to chase clarity, and a man who can stand firmly in his own emotional ground changes the emotional weather of every room he enters. At this stage, the silence has done something irreversible. It has separated impulse from intention. Where there was once urgency, there is now awareness, and awareness changes how she experiences both you and herself. She's no longer responding automatically. She's feeling more deeply, thinking more carefully, and questioning patterns she once took for granted. When a woman feels the absence of a man who didn't overextend himself, the absence feels heavier, not because of deprivation, but because of contrast. You didn't leave chaos behind. You left calm, and calm is hard to replace. The nervous system remembers how it felt around emotional steadiness. Once it's gone, the body notices before the mind does. Silence also removes illusion. Without constant communication, fantasy dissolves and truth emerges. Either the connection had depth, or it was sustained by momentum alone. This clarity is uncomfortable, which is why silence is so effective. It doesn't distract, it reveals. And revelation always creates emotional movement. From her inner world, this is often when curiosity turns inward. She wonders why your absence feels different from others. Why she keeps replaying moments that seemed ordinary at the time. Why your restraint feels more intense than someone else's pursuit. These questions don't demand answers immediately. They linger, and lingering questions shape attachment. For you, this phase is about restraint without bitterness. Silence fueled by resentment is felt. Silence grounded in self-respect is also felt. The difference is in your internal state. If you're calm, focused, and living your life, the silence carries strength. If you're waiting and watching, it carries tension. She senses which one it is. There's a deeper psychological principle at work here. People value what they cannot easily access, but only when that inaccessibility feels earned, not forced. Your silence feels earned when it aligns with consistency, dignity, and emotional maturity. It doesn't feel like a tactic, it feels like a boundary. As time goes on, the silence becomes part of your identity in her mind, not as absence, but as presence without noise. That kind of presence feels solid, it feels safe, and safety, combined with mystery, creates a powerful emotional pull. Whether she reaches out or not becomes secondary. What matters is that you're no longer chasing emotional confirmation. You're allowing connection to meet you at your level, or not at all. That posture changes everything. Silence stops being something you do and becomes something you are comfortable within. And that comfort is where real power settles. At this stage, the silence has done something irreversible. It has separated impulse from intention. Where there was once urgency, there is now awareness, and awareness changes how she experiences both you and herself. She's no longer responding automatically. She's feeling more deeply, thinking more carefully, and questioning patterns she once took for granted. When a woman feels the absence of a man who didn't overextend himself, the absence feels heavier. Not because of deprivation, but because of contrast. You didn't leave chaos behind. You left calm. And calm is hard to replace. The nervous system remembers how it felt around emotional steadiness. Once it's gone, the body notices before the mind does. Silence also removes illusion. Without constant communication, fantasy dissolves and truth emerges. Either the connection had depth or it was sustained by momentum alone. This clarity is uncomfortable, which is why silence is so effective. It doesn't distract, it reveals. And revelation always creates emotional movement. From her inner world, this is often when curiosity turns inward. She wonders why your absence feels different from others, why she keeps replaying moments that seemed ordinary at the time, why your restraint feels more intense than someone else's pursuit. These questions don't demand answers immediately. They linger, and lingering questions shape attachment. For you, this phase is about restraint without bitterness. Silence fueled by resentment is felt. Silence grounded in self-respect is also felt. The difference is in your internal state. If you're calm, focused, and living your life, the silence carries strength. If you're waiting and watching, it carries tension. She senses which one it is. There's a deeper psychological principle at work here. People value what they cannot easily access, but only when that inaccessibility feels earned, not forced. Your silence feels earned when it aligns with consistency, dignity, and emotional maturity. It doesn't feel like a tactic, it feels like a boundary. As time goes on, the silence becomes part of your identity in her mind, not as absence, but as presence without noise. That kind of presence feels solid, it feels safe, and safety, combined with mystery, creates a powerful emotional pull. Whether she reaches out or not becomes secondary. What matters is that you're no longer chasing emotional confirmation. You're allowing connection to meet you at your level, or not at all. That posture changes everything. Silence stops being something you do and becomes something you are comfortable within, and that comfort is where real power settles. Eventually, the silence stops expanding and starts settling. It becomes a quiet constant rather than a sharp absence. This is where its deepest effect shows itself. When something no longer feels temporary, the mind treats it as real. She begins to emotionally reorganize around the possibility that this is who you are now, centered, selective, unmoved by impulse. From a psychological standpoint, this is the moment when meaning crystallizes. Early silence creates tension. Sustained silence creates interpretation. She assigns a narrative to it, and that narrative shapes how she feels. If you had chased, she would have felt pursued. Because you didn't, she feels evaluated. And being evaluated awakens self-awareness in a way pursuit never does. What many men don't realize is that silence often triggers a woman's desire to show up more clearly. Not louder, not dramatic, but more intentional. When access is no longer guaranteed, effort becomes conscious. She considers what she would say, how she would say it, and whether she's willing to risk vulnerability to re-enter your space. That internal negotiation is emotionally significant. Your role during this phase is simple, but not easy. You remain consistent, you don't posture, You don't send mixed signals. You don't break silence to test reactions. You live your life in alignment with your values. That alignment is felt as emotional integrity. Integrity is attractive because it feels rare and unshakable. There's also something important happening inside you. The silence has recalibrated your standards. You're no longer driven by the need to be chosen. You're driven by the need to choose well. That shift subtly changes how you perceive her. You see more clearly. You notice patterns you ignored before. Silence sharpens perception. If she does reach out, the tone is often different, less casual, less entitled, more aware. That change didn't come from anything you said. It came from what you didn't say. Your silence taught her how to approach you, and people always reveal how they value something by how carefully they handle it. And if she doesn't reach out, the silence still wins. Because you didn't shrink yourself to maintain connection. You didn't trade dignity for attention. You allowed truth to surface without force. That truth protects you from emotional depletion and misaligned attachment. This is the quiet power of silence. It doesn't demand outcomes, it creates conditions. And in those conditions, real intentions rise to the surface. Whatever emerges next does so honestly, without pressure, without distortion. And that honesty is the foundation of any connection worth keeping. By now, the silence is no longer a strategy, it's a state of being. And this is where its impact becomes permanent. You're not waiting for a reaction. You're not hoping for a message. You're grounded in yourself, and that grounding is what ultimately changes how you're experienced, not just by her, but by anyone who comes into your life. From a psychological lens, this is emotional sovereignty. You are no longer governed by external validation or emotional unpredictability. You've learned that connection feels best when it's mutual, unforced, and calm. Silence taught you that you don't need to chase depth. Depth responds to stability. That lesson stays with you long after this situation ends. For her, whether she realizes it consciously or not, you've become a reference point, a contrast. Every interaction she has after you will be measured against the way your presence felt without noise. Men who over-explain will feel lighter. Men who rush will feel anxious. Men who try too hard will feel hollow. You didn't try to impress. You didn't plead to be understood. You simply stood still in your truth. That leaves an imprint. This is why silence is remembered more vividly than words. Words can be argued with. Silence is felt. It lives in the body. It creates emotional memory. She may move on, but she won't forget how it felt to lose access to someone who didn't lose himself. That memory subtly reshapes her future choices. For you, the final shift is this. You stop equating intensity with intimacy. You realize that peace is not boring, it's rare. You stop proving and start discerning. You no longer open yourself to anyone who shows interest. You open yourself to those who show alignment. Silence trained you to value your emotional energy as something finite and valuable. If connection returns, it does so on different terms. If it doesn't, you don't collapse. You've already integrated the lesson. You understand now that your power was never in how loudly you spoke, but in how firmly you stood when you didn't. This is the truth most men are never taught. Silence is not absence. It's self-respect made visible through restraint. It's confidence without performance. It's strength without display. And once you embody it, you don't need to calculate when to use it. It becomes part of how you move. The longer you remain silent, the deeper the impact isn't on her. It's on you. And that internal shift is what makes everything else in your life sharper, calmer, and more aligned. Silence didn't make you powerful. It revealed that you already were.